Hello, we are Lumen Publishing from Iași, Romania, and for the last 20 years we have promoted high-quality standards of publication and peer review process for scientific journals. As a result of the sustained effort of our authors, reviewers, and editors, in 2022 we are honored to present to the academic and research community a number of 19 scientific journals, indexed in some of the most prestigious databases in the world, like Web of Science, Erih Plus, EBSCO, CEEOL, Index Copernicus, Heine Online, Ideas Repec, Phil Papers, Google Scholar, and many more others. Also, many of our journals are present in printed or electronic version in more than 300 universitary libraries around the world. Our journals cover a broad spectrum of research fields in humanities and social sciences. Please see our complete list of journals at the link provided in the description of this video. From that link, you can access the web page of each journal and find out details about the topics of publication and the indexing specific to every journal.
The scientific journals published by Lumen Publishing are the following. Postmodern Openings, Revista Românească pentru Educație Multidimensională, Romanian Journal for Multidimensional Education. Brain, Broad Research in Artificial Intelligence and Neuroscience. Brand, Broad Research in Accounting, Negotiation and Distribution. Libri, Linguistic and Literary Broad Research and Innovation. Logos Universality Mentality Education Novelty. Social Sciences. Logos Universality Mentality Education Novelty. Philosophy and Humanistic Sciences. Logos Universality Mentality Education Novelty. Political Sciences and European Studies. Logos Universality Mentality Education Novelty. Economics and Administrative Sciences. Logos Universality Mentality Education Novelty. Law. Journal de Studii Juridis, Journal for Legal Studies. European Journal of Law and Public Administration. Yearbook of Petre Andrei University of Iași. Section, Social Work, Sociology, Psychology. Yearbook of Petre Andrei University of Iași. Section, Law, Economics, Political Sciences. Moldavian Journal for Education and Social Psychology. Eastern European Journal of Medical Humanities and Bioethics. Journal of Mediation and Social Welfare. Journal for Social Media Inquiry. Journal for Ethics in Social Studies. To come to the aid of our authors all over the world, in order to guide them through the editorial requirements of the submission process, here are the author guidelines that should be taken into consideration before submitting an article to one of Lumen's journals. In the following minutes, we will let you know about the submission preparation checklist, the duration of the editorial process, rules for scheduling for publication, steps for submission, policy for authorship, guidelines for contributors, the organization of the manuscript, the anti-plagiarism scan, fees, copyright rules.
Now we will take you through each step at a time. 1. Submission preparation checklist. As part of the submission process, authors are required to check off their submission's compliance with all of the following items, and submissions may be returned to authors that do not adhere to these guidelines. The submission has not been previously published, nor it is under evaluation elsewhere. The submission file is in OpenOffice, Microsoft Word, RTF, or WordPerfect document file format. Where available, URLs for the references have been provided. The text is single-spaced, uses a 12-point font, employs italics rather than underlining, except with URL addresses, and all illustrations, figures, and tables are placed within the text at the appropriate points, rather than at the end. The text adheres to the stylistic and bibliographic requirements of a pastyle references formatting. The instructions in ensuring a blind review have been followed. 2. Duration of editorial procedure. The average time during which the preliminary assessment of manuscripts is conducted 90 days. The average time during which the reviews of manuscripts are conducted 180 days. The average time in which the article is published 200 days. 3. Scheduling for publication. The scheduling of an accepted article may change depending on the display required to ensure the issue consistency and completion of the works in progress. The final scheduling is communicated by the editor in direct communication with the author. An issue can range from 5 up to 25 papers per issue, depending on the journal. Special issues may appear, dedicated to conferences, scientific events, or other particular topics. Our editorial and ethics policies aim at respecting the researcher's fairness in accessing our journal by allowing the paper submission to as many researchers as possible from diverse regions of the world. Geographical geographical diversity of the researchers affiliated to research institutes, research and educational centers, universities, etc., aims at giving the opportunity to as many researchers as possible from diverse regions of the world to submit and publish their research results with our journal. We strongly encourage geographic diversity of authors' affiliations and publication records that validate their participation in the scholarly community associated with the stated scope of the journal. The article's scheduling generally takes into consideration the date of the article's final acceptance. However, due to the specificity of each issue and also to the needs of geographical diversity of the authors, the scheduling of articles in each issue will be performed by the editor in charge, respecting our editorial policies and considering the international standards for publication. We reserve the right of last-minute changes which may occur in the schedule for publication of the papers due to ethical or copyright transfer reasons.
4. Steps for submission. All new submissions receive an ID that is used to identify the article. This ID should be kept throughout the entire evaluation process. Included in all correspondence and in documents related to the open access fee. Before submitting an article to our journals, the author must make sure the manuscript is not under evaluation elsewhere. Important. When the author submit a revised version of an article, the document should be submitted under the same submission ID, not by creating a new submission. In exceptional cases, the revised version of an article could be sent by email, specifying the submission ID. 5. Policy for authorship. The authors of the scientific articles are generally those who participate in the elaboration of the research and the writing of the article itself. In theoretical research, such as philosophical, legal or political, one or at most a few people participate in all stages of the research, in exact sciences and in sciences of nature, and partly in social sciences where the research is wider. There are a large number of people involved in research, both in preliminary phases, in collecting experimental data, and in drawing conclusions and writing the article. For a person to be on the list of authors, she should have significant intellectual contributions in at least one of the domains: conceiving and design of the paper, data acquisition, data analysis and interpretation, analysis statistics, scientific supervision of the research, elaboration of a draft of the article, formulation of substantial reviews with important intellectual content. All authors must agree on publication and be able to support research by answering questions about this research. Contributors who do not meet the criteria to be authors should be included in the acknowledgments. As regards the author's order, this should respect the volume of work submitted and the importance of the scientific contribution of each author. Lead author. First author, in the case of publications with multiple authors, one author should assume the role of lead author, even in different publications. The lead author is different to the first author. In all Lumen Publishing journals, the lead author is considered to be the first author and corresponding author. We admit exceptions. Based on an all authors request, authors could decide to be equally responsible for the paper. In this case, they are mentioned in alphabetical order, with the acknowledgement that all authors have an equal contribution to the article. Co-authors. All co-authors of a publication are responsible for authorship by providing consent to authorship to the lead author. Co-authors acknowledge that they meet the authorship criteria set above. A co-author should have participated sufficiently in the work to take responsibility for appropriate portions of the content. Approval. By providing consent to authorship to the lead author. Co-authors are acknowledging that they have reviewed and approved the manuscript. Integrity. Each co-author is responsible for the content of all appropriate portions of the manuscript, including the integrity of any applicable research in any stage of the publication process. If an author does not acknowledge her own contribution to the paper or disagrees with the structure, order of the authorship, or even with the publication process in itself, the publication process is frozen until all authors consent to the publication. The paper can withdraw from publication if all the conditions are not met. If after publication of the paper a situation of ethical misconduct, including but not limited to plagiarism, gift authorship, ghost authorship, fabrication of data, and so on, is brought into the attention of the editorial team of Lumen Publishing, an ethical inquiry will be conducted. If the allegations are proven, a partial or total retraction of the paper will take place.
6. Guidelines for contributors. Use of rules for citations and references. Exceptionally, some of the Lumen journals may use other citation styles, but this is mentioned in the description of each journal. Please consult the printed guidelines for each journal on the journal's platform. Any paper that does not comply with the aforementioned requirements will be returned to the authors for corrections. Manuscripts should be no more than 10,000 words. Submitted papers will be screened by the volume's editors before they enter the peer review process. 7. The structure of the manuscript. Title page. Title of the paper should be clear and concise, providing the reader with an idea of the article's main topic. Should not exceed 15 words. No subtitles, mottos, or any other introductory words allowed. Abstract should have between 200-250 words and should briefly present the main ideas expressed in the article, such as the context of the paper. Objectives, hypotheses or thesis, if any, methodology, mentioned briefly, results only the main or most relevant results, conclusions optional. Keywords, between 5 and 7 keywords, separated by semicolons. Affiliation, the author should mention the institution of affiliation, city, country, and the contact details, at least email address, of all authors of the paper, if more than one. A short biodata and a photo of the author should be provided in the beginning of the document, before the title. This part will be excluded from the file sent to peer review, but will be published with the article if accepted for publication. Note: all information provided in the title page will be removed from the article before sending it for evaluation to peer reviewers. Blind peer review process. Main body. Introduction. The introduction provides the reader with a brief idea of the content of the article. Should contain information about the scientific context of the research or theoretical article. Scopes and objectives of the paper, hypotheses, if any. Literature review. Should present the relevant literature on the topics of the paper and should be structured upon specific analysis criteria. The scientific literature should be critically approached by the authors. Should mention the identified gaps that led to the current research. These gaps are what underlies the original contribution of the article. Should argue the need for the research in the universe of the existing scientific literature and the conjunction point between it and the current paper. All sources used for documentation in this chapter must be correctly quoted, according to the 6th Apostille Manual. Methodology mandatory chapter for research articles. Some theoretical articles could have methodology, some don't. This chapter describes the methods and techniques used for collecting, analyzing, and interpreting data. In the field research papers, the authors should provide information on the sample, data collection, compliance with the ethical guidelines. This information could also be mentioned in acknowledgments. Other details regarding the data collection process. Precise and comprehensive description of the analyzed methods, particularly when they are new or poorly known in the literature. Results mandatory chapter for research articles. The results are presented in large, using tables, figures, graphics, or any other type of visual representation destined to help the reader better understand the ideas resulted. The statistical data should be accompanied by explanations on its significance. The data that could contradict the hypotheses must be presented and analyzed. The authors should present the way in which the collected data leads to the fulfillment of the research objective. Theoretical subchapters especially used in theoretical articles. For theoretical articles, the chapters of methodology and results could be replaced by subchapters of theoretical analysis. We recommend using the analytical framework of the theoretical papers, which consist in arguments to support the thesis and arguments to argue the thesis. Limits and discussions. This subchapter presents the validity of the research and its limits. The authors should consider and present the geographical, epistemological, methodological limitations of the research. The authors should present how the results can be extrapolated and generalized to the literature on the topic. The authors should clearly state the original elements of the paper that could be of interest for worldwide readers. Conclusions. The conclusions should be correlated with the objectives and the data analyzed. The authors should mention here whether the hypotheses, if any, were validated or not, in case of evidence-based research. Acknowledgements. Acknowledgements usually include the recognition of the contribution of third parties to the research that led to creating the article, or the actual writing of the article, but whose contribution is not so significant as to be considered authors. Also, the acknowledgements include information on the source of research funding, the research organization in which the authors carried out the research activity or research project in which the data was obtained. References. The references chapter must be formatted according to the guidelines of the 6th edition of the EBSCO manual. It is very important to make sure that there is a full compliance between the sources mentioned in the text and in references. An empirical research article or a theoretical article must contain a minimum of 20 bibliographic sources and a maximum of 50. At least 25% of the sources used should be from Web of Science Index journals. For a literature review article, it is imperative to use 50 to 100 bibliographic sources, of which at least 25% should be from Web of Science Index journals. The article should contain specific and expressly stated criteria for structuring the literature review. All submissions will be peer-reviewed before entering the publication process. Authors are expected to participate in the peer review process for further issues of this journal.
8. The similarity check with other sources. Lumen Publishing scans each article accepted for publication with the Authenticate software only after the article is considered final, so as not to make any changes that may increase the likelihood to be above the accepted limit, which is at most 5%. The articles that were proven to have plagiarism elements will automatically be rejected from publication if the article exceeds the 5% similarity threshold, but it is not proved to be plagiarized. The editor sends the article back to the authors to motivate the identified similarities and eventually to correct possible negligence. Each additional scan will be charged with €7. The authors whose works have been identified with similarities beyond the accepted limit will have to accept that all costs incurred by the editorial staff for the processing of the article will be withheld from the already paid fees. The full refund of the open access fee for articles identified with plagiarism suspicions is only possible through the formation and express acceptance of the ethics committee of the affiliate institution of each of the authors.
9. Fees. For the open access fee of each journal, please visit the website of the particular journal where you wish to submit your paper. The link to the homepage of all Lumen journals is available in the description of this video. 10. Copyright notice. Authors who publish with this journal agree to the following terms. Authors retain copyright and grant this journal right of first publication, with the work simultaneously licensed under a Creative Commons attribution license that allows others to share the work, with an acknowledgement of the work's authorship and initial publication in this journal. Authors are able to enter into separate, additional contractual arrangements for the non-exclusive distribution of the journal's published version of the work, as to post it to an institutional repository or publish it in a book, with an acknowledgement of its initial publication in this journal. Authors are permitted and encouraged to post their work online as in institutional repositories or on their website, prior to and during the submission process, as it can lead to productive exchanges, as well as an earlier and greater citation of published work. Thank you for listening to our guidelines for authors. We hope the information provided in this video will be helpful to you for your future submissions to Lumen Journals.